3 planes, no hotels, and a dot matrix printout taped to the wall. That's how Tyler Marshall found himself on a bumpy flight to Dutch Harbor, Alaska, crammed into a tiny plane with a high school girls basketball team, bouncing so hard on the landing that everyone hit the ceiling. And that wasn't even the wildest part of the trip. Tyler didn't grow up dreaming of seafood plants or MES systems, but somewhere between bunkhouses in remote Alaska and sticker charts on the terminal, he found a calling. So how does a wrestling kid from the Pacific Northwest end up changing the way factories work across America? Stick around. Hello and welcome to the Manufacturing Culture Podcast. I'm your host, Jim Mayer, and if you're new here, this is a show where we dig into the stories behind people driving manufacturing forward. Not their companies, not their products, but who they are, what shaped them, and how they lead through change. Every week, we're talking to builders, operators, and leaders about culture, leadership, and the future of work in the industrial world. And hey, if you're enjoying the show, be sure to follow us, leave a review, or check out past episodes at themfgconnector.com. You can also follow the show on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok to keep the conversation going. Okay, today's guest, I am pumped for this one. He's worked in software for food manufacturers for over a dozen years, but don't let that fool you. This guy's journey reads more like an episode of Deadliest Catch than a Silicon Valley startup story. He started his career in the Alaskan seafood industry, flying into some of the most remote plants in North America, helping operators modernize, sometimes with little more than duct tape, bunk beds, and gut instinct. He's helped companies from $5 million to over $1 billion in revenue find savings, scale operations, and rethink how technology and people intersect on the factory floor. He's even got mistaken for Rob McElhaney in rural Canada more than once. And today he's here to talk about leadership, change, and what it means to build alignment from the ground up. Tyler Marshall, welcome to the Manufacturing Culture Podcast. How are you doing today, my friend?
Doing well. Beautiful day here in Seattle. So 0 complaints and favorite place in the country when it's 80 degrees.
I can only imagine that because I've been to Seattle and I wasn't as fortunate enough to see 80 degrees when I was in Seattle. It was overcast. It was still beautiful. It was an amazing place, but I can only imagine when the sun's shining that it just makes it even more special.
It really does. The mountains, the water, all of the above. I know we're here to talk about manufacturing today, but with the technology companies that are up here, it's definitely a recruiting trick they have on when they bring people up here. I will say, like, I've talked to a few of the individuals who are bringing people in, and they're like, "Oh no, we're going to make sure you visit on this week. We're checking the weather each time."
I like that. All right, good. That's a good tip. Maybe that's why recruiters in Phoenix don't bring people down in the summer. Anyway, Tyler, let's talk about you. The show does have a new icebreaker question. You get the benefit of not necessarily knowing what that is. So welcome to the show. I hope you have fun with this. Tyler, if your life were a movie, what genre would it be? Who would play you? And what would the opening scene be?
Okay. From a genre standpoint and just kind of competitive nature and everything else, it would be some sort of sports categorized, like historical sports movie along those lines. I don't know. I've always been, smaller in stature, I guess. So my mind went to Rudy for some reason as the opening one. So I'm not quite sure if that's right, but I'm going off the cuff here. But as far as who would play me, I've been, may or may not have a celebrity doppelganger that I've been told multiple times by random people on the street. Last time was in remote Canada at a random hotel, had an individual walk up to me and tell me I looked like this person. So I feel like I have to say this. And my friends who listen to this too, who know me well, they'll know him and everything. But of course, the best known character of his is Mac, and It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. And so it's the Mac lady. And as soon as
that you say it, I see it. I wasn't putting it together until you, but now even the smile, the squint of the smile, you've got that nailed, man. I feel like I'm watching It's Always Sunny or Welcome to Wrexham, right? Yeah, well done. All right, I dig it.
Yeah, it was, honestly, it's probably almost 10 times now that it's been random, strangers, have asked me since you explained to me as we were setting this up that we have the certain rating and everything else. Yeah, the individual, like there was some funny words said by the individual in Canada who said it once he realized I wasn't just, yeah, there's, I think the final one was I'm a poor man's version of that. And I was like, oh, I thought there was supposed to be a level of politeness in this
Wow.
environment. Like, what is coming out here? So, anyway, that would have to be. You had one more. Was there one more question on that?
Yeah.
So,
What would the opening scene be?
opening scene. Oof. That's a tougher one. I mean, let's leave any It's Always Sunny references to the side because that just like makes me not want to list Rob McElhenney as the individual anymore as it comes out. But I would have to say probably, I mean, the sport that I loved the most was actually wrestling. So I grew up as a wrestler and did all that. And I don't know if you're familiar with there's a Vision Quest movie and everything else. And it's something where, an immediate setback, like something where there's like some sort of immediate challenge that's being faced, just setting the stage for like, what's the journey back to like the top or success. So a little bit ambiguous there, but something along those lines. I'm going to text you or call you after this with even more now that I've got this down and think about it.
Absolutely.
This is what's going to keep me up at night tonight.
Yeah, there you
what
go.
does that exact scene actually look like?
Love it. And speaking of Rob, have you watched his new show, Mythic Quest, on Apple?
I have. Yeah, it's hilarious. And again,
Oh my
just
God.
another character where like, do I really need to be like, I know that's not him, like in real life. I think that's closest is Welcome to Wrexham, but like the character, of course, and It's Always Sunny, and the character in Mythic, a little bit more redeemable in Mythic
Yeah,
Quest, but
absolutely.
like still just not quite me. So,
All right. Well, and the parallels between software company, right? I mean, and hopefully where you're at isn't quite like the game in Mythic Quest or like Mythic Quest itself. Anyway, we'll get into all that. Great answer. And I'm not going to be able to unsee Rob now for the rest of this interview. So if I call you Rob during this conversation, please forgive me ahead of time. Please find my ignorance charming.
completely allowed. Mac is fine as well.
All right, man, now you're setting me up for failure here. So, Tyler, what does culture mean to you? Now that we've had fun, we understand really who you are a little bit. What does culture mean to you?
And so the first word comes to mind when I hear culture, talk about culture, kind of go through all these different conversations with companies I work with, etc. In my mind, it all starts with honestly alignment. Like
Okay.
there's an aspect like because culture, successful culture can look a lot of different ways, but like ultimately in my mind, there's alignment to a goal, an initiative, an idea, something that everyone is bought into. And the way that like you ultimately get there is culture. So that's the kind of first place my mind always goes when I have this conversation is like, all right, what are we looking to do? Like, what is the objective? Let's build the culture to facilitate that, right? And
Yeah.
of course, then you take in like interpersonal skills behind that or interpersonal personalities, et cetera, to kind of like design that. But it's that commonality of endpoint there.
Yeah, I love that. I talk all the time about the base of culture, the very foundation of culture being the alignment of values between the organization and their employees, right? So I love how you take that and build on to that. And so very validating for me. So thank you, Tyler, for validating my whole thought process on my show during your interview. So Tyler, now we're going to take a little trip in a time machine. We're going to go back to the beginning, before software, before seafood. What were you like growing up? And was there something that or a moment that first sparked your interest, your curiosity about systems and people and the way things worked?
As mentioned, I'm based in Seattle now, but I grew up about an hour and a half north, just south of the Canadian border, which is why I did have that expectation of politeness and was thrown within that family and like my father and just people around me and everything else. There was a lot of just aspects of people who wanted to build something, right? Whether that was like construction or in terms of my mom, like it was building up like a network of schools for kids like to have access to like different things like that, and it basically taking something and trying to make it better, improved, bigger, whatever it necessarily need to like step up to that next level. And so when like we fast forward, and I'll come back to it, but when you fast forward into like why I've enjoyed so much working in this manufacturing space and like really ultimately solving problems, I think it was just being grounded in that for so many years and being like witness to it as well as ultimately like participating in it. I mean, my very first jobs back in those days and everything else like that was, well, run around helping my dad on like construction sites and things like that. And so it was always a lot of satisfaction coming out of like seeing something through to the end and then having, a physical product to actually show for it, which has been interesting as, of course, I work more in like software and systems now. It's less tangible, but what we're doing is providing that to companies that ultimately have that tangible output that you can physically see, touch, hold, etc.
Yeah. So your manufacturing journey, I believe, if I remember correctly, started out in the seafood industry, right? And that's basically where you've existed is in food manufacturing. Am I off base in that?
No, you're on point, and I've expanded in the last few years, but for the past 15, and I continue to do so. I spend a lot of my time working in the food manufacturing space, which is, of course, when you think about manufacturing as a broader term, and you start getting into these like individual areas, I would say it's especially as I've gotten more experience outside of it's weird. It's fun, and that's probably again why I lean into and enjoy it so much. Back to like why I started down this path, and yes, it did. It was a small detour into the world of finance at the start of my career.
Okay.
Was found out I wasn't necessarily, didn't work for me. Wasn't quite the right fit. And then ultimately got started with a company here in Seattle who had a lot of work and doing a lot of things in the Alaskan seafood industry. And they said, hey, do you want to go on a plane to Alaska to see, fish come in and to put in a box and send out the road? I was like, absolutely. Let's go do it. So
That's cool. I love that. So you've got to have some wild stories, and you alluded to the fact in our pre-interview and even before we hit the record button today that you have some wild stories over that early time with the Alaskan Seafood Company. What is a story that stands out as just like the epitome of the Alaskan seafood industry wildness that exists up there?
So I have a couple that I can breeze through pretty quick. But when I
All right,
first
cool.
joined the organization at that point, which was called Parity, and working with them, it was the owners who started it came from that seafood industry, and they had built some software to help with the tools and management of payments to fishermen. And the story, this is a repeat of his story, which leads into mine, which is part of the reason that they built this software is like when he first started, which honestly wasn't that long ago, they were still having like duffel bags of cash delivered via plane to the grounds to hand and pay out to the fishermen. And so he was a controller, an accountant by trade. And so he's sitting here like, this probably needs some software like that we're actually going through. Again, quite some time ago, I would say, like 3 or 4 years ago, I guess it would be. But like, even then, he was like, I was a kid just signing for duffel bags of cash off this plane that landed to pay these fishermen. And so that kind of led into, and I was like, this is one of the things he told me very early on, even before I had traveled up there. And I was like, all right, so this is going to be crazy. This is going to be wild as we get into it. And as I like ventured up there and you get to these places where, oh no, it's 3 different planes, right? You're getting out to these remote areas and like, oh no, there's no hotel. Like you actually stay in the facility with everyone because they have bunkhouses to actually, because otherwise it's shut down for 7 months out of the year, right? And so there wasn't, you don't book through the normal channels. They like charter the plane for you to have your seat out there, which leads to the last story I had, just related to the travel side, and we can get a little bit more into the actual operations, was I was on a plane in January out to Dutch Harbor, Alaska, where they film a lot of like Deadliest Catch, and it's referenced there a lot as you go through that, which also I've been up there when they were filming, tried to get on camera, it didn't work. So still not famous yet, but hopefully you'll help me out here, Jim, as we get into it.
Man, I'll do my best here, man, but I don't know about my little show.
Anyway, I don't want to be famous. We'll keep moving on from that one. So we'll just as I'm on this plane, it was in the middle of January and there was storm, so it was backed up, and somehow, some reason, like I get bumped up the list, and the list was being stickered to like the wall at this point off of a dot matrix printer of like what the waiting list was. And every morning you'd go in and you'd look at this like taped up dot matrix like printout of like where you're at in the waiting list to get on this plane. And I called the contact I was supposed to be out there working with, and they were getting ready to ramp up operations. I was helping with them with some deployments and things like that. And I was at like the bottom of this list. I was like, I don't think I'm going to make it out there this week. Well, of course, call was made. Next day I go in, I'm at the top of the list. And then one plane gets out. Well, with along with me on this plane, for whatever reason, there was a high school girls basketball team who like went out there to play a game, and somehow they got to the top of the list too. And so like totally fine, like everything else. So in Dutch Harbor, the way the runway is set up is like it's got water on either end of the runway, and then it's a mountain, and you kind of wrap around the mountains to like land and come into it. I'd been out
It's
there
a
before,
hard
and
pass. That's a
oh,
hard pass for me.
I personally love it. Like this type of stuff, like is what got me excited about it. And I'd been out at this for this story. I'd been out there a couple of times already, so I knew it and everything else. And so they wrap around the mountain, they drop down, and if they can't do it, they'll wrap around the other mountain and try and drop in. They have a couple different options. So it took them like 3 tries. They still weren't able to land. Which, by the way, at this point in time, too, when you travel out there was a refueling stop because if they're unable to land, they wouldn't been able to make it back. So you always stop refueling and then do the whole thing. And so it wraps around. Finally, on the last try, I think the pilot was just like, we're doing this no matter what. And we bounced so hard as we came around the mountain to like land that everyone's head hit the ceiling. Like if you weren't like strapped in, and like, I was like, whoa, what just happened? Like everything else. But like, end of this story, right? And the worst part is like, what hurt the worst was actually my ears. Because when you have a team of high school girls basketball and the like noise that like was emitted when everyone's head hit the ceiling, I was just like, I like met my contact out there and he said something. I was like, give me 10. I don't think I can hear you just yet.
That's awesome. I love that. I've got this vision in my head of, because I've never been up there. Alaska is the one and only state I've never been to. The one and only U.S. state. I will get there at some point, but I've got this vision in my head of this bush plane landing on the water with a guy throwing out duffel bags of cash to fishermen, almost like a shady drug deal movie. Am I that far off base with that image that I have in my head?
For today, yes, you are, but not that long ago, you weren't. And so I want to be fair to all the people I know and have friends up in Alaska and everything else. For today, no, we're past that point. But even, during my career, it's been interesting how much it's evolved. And I think I just changed the opening scene to my movie too. I think we've got a new one based on what you just described right there. So I guess I would flip the genre too. I'm not sure I'm going to tie in sports yet, but we'll
get there. Well, we've got a long recording still here. So you went from the Alaska seafood. What was the next step in your career? What was next for you?
Yeah. So, I mean, just to actually bring it back to the true topic as we're going through it, like it was really interesting to see the challenges faced by like the Alaskan seafood industry when it comes to manufacturing. So, of course, when you think about, starting a manufacturing plant or like trying to build something up as you go through that, you're obviously looking for like some level of consistency, right? Have some sort of plan, some sort of, throughput, unit count, whatever you're looking for to like determine whether or not it's the right decision. And being thrown into that kind of at the early stages of my career was really interesting because I basically got to see what it looks like to do that in one of the most chaotic environments that you could define, right? Your supply is wholly dependent on Mother Nature. Well, again, there's a lot of money that goes into like setting, so they have a good idea, but it's all forecast and it can swing 100% either direction. And I've seen it in my career as it comes in. So your supply, you're unsure on. You don't actually have a workforce that's you can draw from. Like you are flying everyone in from Seattle, et cetera, to bring it in. You don't like anything that you need to have happen. Like you have to be self-sustaining, which is the thing that like I will say true Alaskans and just kind of like give them the respect that's due there is they are like self-sufficient. Like they are individuals who will like find a way with duct tape and whatever it takes to make something work. And so kind of like within the career journey, like I, being the age I was and kind of learning that and getting into it, I knew the best practices from like school. I knew the best practices from like a textbook, right? And you could like think about how you'd want to apply those. And I basically had this opportunity to like help apply those in this situation with all these parameters that normally you don't have to deal with, right? Like even as simple as, hey, connection to like internet, which we all trust, take for granted. We have backup lines, everything else like that. Well, until Starlink came along, there was no backup lines. Like if the internet went down, they were down for 4 days, right?
Sure.
Like if the boat didn't make it in with the supplies, like they had to figure out something to do in that interim period to work through that. And it helped me understand what it takes to be successful in this like very high pressure, high variable environment. And it kind of stress tests those like textbook protocols, if you will, right? Like, how do you actually apply those in this environment? And so it gave me, just speaking from where I think I've found like kind of some success and gone through this, it gave me this like way of looking at it of like, okay, this is worst case scenario and here's how we got around it. Let's work that back into some of the areas where maybe that isn't as much of a risk, but also now we can ensure that it doesn't completely blow things up if something does happen.
Got it. So what was the next step for you? Because you're not currently working for a seafood company. So what was that next step beyond the manufacturing?
Yeah, and so as I like moved into the consulting role and like working on systems and software and different things like that, that's where I really got to ultimately apply that experience and knowledge, right? Like is looking at like these environments. And so the solutions that I've provided over the past bit of my career as we've gone through it are directly intertwined with the shop floor. So walking
Okay.
around, like I said, that environment of like all
Yep.
these people who are flown in, they get, a week of training and then they're off obviously out operating the line. These different things are going through it. I basically took that knowledge and like worked with these solutions to figure out how to apply those, and basically kind of tying it back into the culture aspect of the whole thing is like building a culture with a brand new workforce and trying to get them trained up on systems. Back to that alignment concept, it's a challenge, right? Like, and there's just a lot that went through that. And so my career then continued down the path with systems and software for manufacturers on the shop floor, and expanded from the seafood to the broader food industry, and ultimately now working in a variety of industries, including automotive,
Okay.
et cetera.
Awesome. Was there a moment that your career path wasn't obvious?
Which one do I pick as we were going through that? Like it's at that stage when we actually were providing consulting services first, then we decided to build a software product. And then from there, like there was many times where we had 6 different paths on what we were going to do. We had really solid relationships with our customers, right? We were able to like have like detailed conversations with them. They were open about their challenges, right? Then they had called 6 different ones. And then we would sit there in a room and talk about like, all right, which path do we go down? And that's just within the software side of it. And then we looked at, okay, well, do we continue down like, again, focusing on the food side of it, there's the aspect of food safety, how that intertwines within all the manufacturing processes. And do we really focus our efforts on the quality side of it and different things like that? And so I knew I liked the space I worked in. I knew there was a bunch of challenges and problems. It by chance, by decision, by a number of different things over those different years, I don't want to say fell into this path, but just kind of like picked this out of the different options as we were working through that. It's like, hey, here's a space that can use assistance in all these different areas. How do we best provide that? So
Cool. What is something that you believed about manufacturing as an industry, or the people of manufacturing, or the processes of manufacturing that you had to unlearn because through your experience, your thought process evolved?
So it was interesting within like starting in the food space, and then like let's contrast that with like the automotive, right? And
Sure.
automotive, we have projections, timelines, like multi-year plans as they're going through the forecasting and everything else like that. And I mean, an aspect of food, which talked about like the seafood being like on the very end of the spectrum of the craziness, remote, like only open for part of the year, depending on Mother Nature, etc. We're also talking about like a perishable good. Like in all honesty, if you, and I appreciated this about this, especially early on in my career, is that if you mess up, like nothing big, like nothing like food safety wise,
Sure.
but say if you like implement a process that isn't ideal and go through that, you're turning and changing like that next day or different things, and you can adjust on the fly. I probably, as I like started branching into other areas, next slap in the face, right? Wake up call, if you will, as you're going through your career is like, oh no, you can't be that like gunslinger mode in some of these other areas, right? And so it almost came full circle back to, oh yeah, these like textbook best practices. However, I fundamentally believe the right answer is somewhere in the middle, right?
Sure.
Like, not to dive into all the things and pressures that manufacturing has on it today, but if you're not agile, if you're not adjusting, if you're not like thinking about like what you can do in the next 6 months, not just what you can do in the next 6 years, there's some risk there, right? Like you got to
Absolutely.
be as nimble as possible, right?
Yeah. And let's talk briefly about the product that you have, the company you work for here. What is the company, and what do you all do? Just real briefly, so to give the listeners some context of these solutions that you bring.
Yep, absolutely. So the organization's name is Advantive, and we have a handful of products that are all work within the manufacturing industry within a couple of different what we consider to be lines of business, right? And so I directly oversee is brought up before the manufacturing side of it, which is primarily focused on software solutions for the shop floor, specifically manufacturing execution, right? And
Okay.
that's really so we have MES solutions that one of which focuses on the food industry, which was again my history and stories around like bonking my head off the top of planes. And then we also have ones and automotive is mentioned that are really designed to optimize, lines and production lines that have multiple products coming down the line, mixed model, et cetera, as you're building those out. Complex things, right? Like how do you schedule that? How do you manage that? How do you really, improve by 1 minute here, 2 minutes there, 5 minutes there, which again, kind of going back to the whole story, that math is entirely different in food. And I think one of the unique things that we kind of provide as an organization is myself as an example, someone with a varied experience who may be able to look at it in a slightly different way, right? Like, and
Yeah.
beyond that, that's just my space in it. We also cover a lot of quality control within the manufacturing environment, as well as then we also deal a bit within the distribution of that. But everything is product related. And ultimately, our goal is, I mean, we want to make sure that we're helping facilitate operations and we're, improving those. Like it's not just, software for software's sake. Like our goal is to help these organizations that are actually moving physical goods and delivering to our doorsteps, manufacturing them all the way back through that supply chain.
So MES, quality, like a QMS, and a logistics software is that pretty much the suite of
Yeah.
softwares?
And distribution. We also, the final one, which is specific, is we work a lot within the packaging industry. So,
Okay.
and it's been really interesting to myself personally is that some of the customers we work with there were the suppliers of all of my customers in the food manufacturing, and seeing like these connections and the same names and just like as it goes through, it's been interesting. But at the end of the day, yeah, it's within the packaging space, manufacturing for MES. We have our QMS solutions on the quality side of it. And then on the distribution side of it, it's a mix of logistics, but also like ERP tools as well as some e-commerce tools just to help in that space. As we all know, that is not an area that's going to slow down anytime soon.
No. So I imagine you work with companies of varying size, right? Couple million maybe to hundreds, if not billions of dollars, right? What is something that you've seen that connects or unites those smaller companies and the larger companies? Are there similar challenges that you see out in the field?
There are, but the first thing that comes to mind, I'm going to detour a little bit from what you brought up there, which is out of those organizations, it's been really interesting, right? Because you have these varying degrees of like complexity and size and scope and really what they're trying to cover. But our most successful customers, right? Like the thing that intertwines them all, like again, to kind of tie it back to what we were talking about earlier, like it's definitely a level of pride in their product, and that drives alignment, which then drives the culture. And so like that's the one thing that I've seen. And in all transparency, I don't see it everywhere. Like that is not like the case in all these companies that we go to. And it's, never just one thing. It doesn't always look the same way, but it's always very evident when it's there, right? Like
Sure.
it's very evident as it's coming through. The challenge that I think they're facing top to bottom and everything else like that is primarily centered, I guess we could call it like labor, workforce, or different things like that. And there's pressures on all fronts on that, right? So of course, cost cutting measures like automation, et cetera, as you go through that. However, on the flip side of that, like they're now needing more skilled workforce or training on these different things. And then also, of course, as we all well know on this, like in the manufacturing space, like hiring isn't necessarily the easiest. Like there isn't necessarily like a ton of individuals turn around signing up for these, and small sample size, personal perspective. And there's data out there that you can reference this, but just my personal opinion as I walk around and see this is that there's going to be like a significant amount of like opportunity for leadership, right? Like
Yeah.
there's going to be groups that retire, like spots that open up, and it'll be, I think, again, kind kind of trying to tie it back to like the whole topic as we're going through it all, like change management of leadership like that and maintaining culture, maintaining that alignment is going to be like a real challenge, right? Because you already have all this turnover, change, and again, all these outside pressures on these organizations.
Yeah, absolutely. Historically, our industry, manufacturing in general, but skilled trades really. We've historically done a great job of taking those individual contributors that are the best welder, the best fisherman, the best machinist, whatever, and making them leaders, right? And giving them zero skill set on how to lead. And they don't create the best environments. I mean, my whole company exists because of that, right? And I think that you're spot on that as we see this silver tsunami leave and this baby boomer generation does retire, which we've known about for a long time, and workforce issues have been there, right? We just haven't done a great job of solving them outside of automation and thinking that industry 4 was going to be a silver bullet for us. We are going to have an opportunity for Gen Xers, for millennials to step into leadership positions. What is something that you have learned about the way that you lead through your lived experience? Because leadership is a skill that needs to be practiced. It's something that people aren't necessarily born with that trait innately. So what's one thing that you've learned through your experiences on how to lead better the teams that you've led?
We'll answer your question, but I appreciate you calling out like the trade workers and everything else like that. Just quick, like back to the history of me and everything else. My grandfather was a welder. He claimed he was the best welder, but he was never a leader. So I don't know that he was. To get back to your question, as you're bringing up, I think, and this is something I've seen like evident in every manufacturing, that there's the leader in the organization who gets out. Well, let's kind of go down the different tiers here. There's the leader in the operations in the organization who's never out on the shop floor. And I don't think they're ever going to be successful. Like they are not in tune enough with like what's happening and actually visualizing that. For most organizations run into, that tends to be rare. Like people understand that and do that. But then there's the observer, right? Like the one who's just only watching and doing different things. And they can be a good leader, right? They have the capability to maybe see change, implement that, have those interpersonal skills and do everything else. But I think the most effective ones have been the ones who have been willing to, as they're able to, right? And there's always this prioritization, balance of time, different thing as a leader that you're challenged with is like being physically there with your team for certain time periods and doing it with them, facing the challenges head on with them. And like, I think it brings outside of, any sort of like software systems, automation, everything else like that. It brings back to that alignment and just the trust ultimately, right? Like there's a level of, humility and integrity that comes out when a leader's sitting out there and like, yeah, this effing sucks, but let's figure it out together, right? And I'm going to stand here with you and we're going to like dig into this. Like, you do that once, people remember it for the next 10 years, right? And maybe you have to do it again, or maybe you set things up again where you're leveling up those next groups when they're in touch with like, again, it's just so much of it's so like just physical. I use that word a lot, like physical, like you're actually out there doing things and everything else that like, if you're not willing to be one of the individuals out there, it's tough to have the respect, right?
Yeah. So you have used that term physical. Your view of leadership is one that is very present, right? But you're kind of a juxtaposition, right? Because you work in this automated world, in this software world. You're providing those automated solutions. How do you balance the two worlds, that physical present world with the automation, and what does that look like?
It's a fantastic question because it's ultimately at the core of the challenge of like change management into automation, right? Because how are you applying these conceptual ideas, like back to my like textbook into like, oh wow, this is what a seafood operation. Okay, now we can get back to the textbook, like bridging that gap of like, hey, how do we like this idea and concept, this thing that we think will work from an automation standpoint and deploy it in a way that will be successful. And I I think like at the core of it, right? Like as manufacturers, like if you're not looking to do that as a leader, like you will fall behind and you need to be doing it. So there's like this aspect of again market pressure that you have to set up there. And I think that again from a leadership standpoint, that needs to be understood top to bottom. The goal oftentimes too, and I have this conversation with a lot of owners of mid-sized businesses, right, is that they're oftentimes looking to automate, not necessarily to reduce headcount, right? That's the common thread is well, it's cost cutting, everything else. But oftentimes their significant costs are in like hiring, and they constantly have open positions and they're constantly trying to rotate through that. And so, sure, maybe it's one less person in this work center as you're going through that. But I have 4 open recs that I can't fill down over here, and I'm going to take the person out of that and put them in this position over here. And we again, common thread everyone talks about, but I think if you have that leadership standpoint where we are going to win and we're going to figure out how to do more with less together, and it's going to help us all in the long run, you can do some pretty cool things, right? Like you can get the buy-in from the team, and it just helps ensure that change management aspect isn't I'm going to say this, there's always fear in change, like you can't get past that, but you can mitigate that and hopefully ideally build some excitement, not just at the like top down high level approach, this is what we're doing, like, hey, we're doing this because we want to be this much better next year, which means we're going to grow at this, which means there's going to be opportunities for the millennials, for the
Absolutely
next generations that come up.
So you let's continue on this thread on change management. And to me, in my experience, the concept of change is that people fear change, right? But I firmly believe that that's a bunch of BS. I believe that people love change. If people didn't love change, we wouldn't have a fashion industry. We wouldn't have a travel industry. We wouldn't have restaurants. Those are all aspects of change, but the difference is people are authoring that change, right? So when I look at change management, I look at the opportunity to provide employees with the chance to author that change, right? Give them the opportunity to be a part of that change instead of an owner going to a trade show and finding the best MES system, not to throw you guys under the bus or anything, but the flashiest robot or a new machine center or a conveyor system or sensor or HMI or whatever you're talking about, and buying it and implementing it with zero input. That's when people fear change, right? They fear that unknown. They fear being forced to change rather than being invited to help author the change. Is there any, in your experience, I mean, this is your world, is there any validity in my belief there?
It's a fantastic challenge by you. And you used the word that I was going to, like, I am aligned with you on both a personal level and then also from like what I've seen out there, that it's not the change. And the word you used is unknown. It's the fear of that unknown. And then anytime people feel as though they have no autonomy or authority, you're going to have a tough time like getting buy-in, right? And it doesn't have to be you are now like the decision maker in it, right? And it doesn't even have to be, of course, like, oh, you are now you have a vote in what sensors we pick as we go through that. It can be as simple as like, as we deploy these sensors, this part of it is critical. And I need you to own that. And this is why we're doing that. And here's why I want you to own it, because I think you can do A, B, C. So it can look a lot of different ways, but I really appreciated that challenge. Right? If you notice, I struggle a little bit as I went to say like fear of change, because like, I think you're absolutely right. Like there's an aspect that people like, it's not necessarily the change, it's just the unknown. Like, what is that change going to bring me? Like, what does this mean for me personally?
Absolutely.
Let's be candid. We're all self-centered individuals. We're thinking out for number one first, right? Jokes aside, but like it's core, right? Like, and you have to like be in touch with those like emotions of those individuals to a certain extent, just to make sure that, I mean, everyone wins in that end, right? Like we're setting the project up for success. We're setting this individual up for success because now they feel as though they have this directionality, again, autonomy, authority. The trick is, and the challenge as leaders on that is shaping that, right? Like you can't, like I said, you're not going to have every single person out there have a vote on this. You'll never get anywhere. And we're back to that like 6-year, 12-year project, right? As opposed to like the 6 months, and you're falling behind your competitors.
Yeah, I get that. Makes total sense. You brought up emotions just now. And manufacturing as an industry as a whole isn't known for like widespread emotional intelligence, right? But I can only imagine that the Alaskan seafood company takes that lack of emotional intelligence to a whole new level. Would I be off base in that assumption?
Yeah, yes and no. The
Okay.
one aspect of the Alaskan seafood industry that's always been interesting is that you have individuals from even around the world who are coming in and working there. And so like the bit of the melting pot, because oftentimes even in my commentary, I get caught up in like, what happens in the US as you go through all of that. And
Yeah.
like, there's an aspect of like from these different backgrounds coming together. And like when you're forced again in that environment to like, there's no like phone a friend, there's no like Home Depot down the street, right? As you go through this whole thing, like, yeah, they'll be there and it'll be, you know, a day at the earliest, like
Right.
or 2 days as you get into it. I think that it does kind of almost force it, which is again
Okay.
probably colored my like perspective on this. And you know, everyone up there is just they're there to work, they're there to work hard, they're there to like, you know, make a good product, etc. And you really have to kind of rely on each other. And so, is it perfect? Is it the best? Absolutely not. Like, you know, everything has areas for improvement as you go through it all. But like, I think just the environment there actually forces it to be a little bit more in touch or a little bit more in tune, I should say, with the emotional side of it.
I like it. Let's talk about the future a little bit. Let's move towards I mean, we've talked for your early career, where you are now. Let's talk about the future of for you, for manufacturing. What are you seeing around the corner in manufacturing that some people may not be aware of? And if there's nothing, then what excites you about the future of the industry?
So the one that I would say, like, just because background in food manufacturing and being weird and everything else like that is there continues to be a push pull between the larger broader manufacturing and like distribution networks and everything else, and then it migrates back to, you know, how people eat shifts in certain regions. And I think that it will be interesting to see how, in the US specifically, and you look globally, it's all shaped a little bit different. EU has different like regulations, et cetera, as you go through that. I think it'll be interesting to watch and see the challenge of what people want and expectations and having like knowledge as to where their food's coming from and having that detail and going through that. How do you scale a business in that? Because like
Sure.
you can have, you know, I'm not going to knock McDonald's. McDonald's is great. It does what it is, everything else like that. But I'm sure you have a place that you have a burger joint in Phoenix, right, that you absolutely love. And if they go and they try to replicate what McDonald's did, like it is going to look different than like what you're the biggest fan of. And so it's an interesting, like again, just in the food manufacturing space specifically, it's an interesting, like I said, push pull challenge that it'll be interesting to see how, you know, people go in to solve that, right? How they source, how they like process it. And again, with it being a perishable product for the most part, like you can pivot quickly and go through everything. What I am most excited about probably pivots back over to a little bit of, you know, recent bias, if you will, just because I've been working on a few things there. And like some of the things that we're looking to do in even the automotive space, right? Like it's oftentimes on the cutting edge of manufacturing tech, right? Or
Yeah.
strategies or processes or systems as you go through all of that. And I think just watching like all the tools that are being put in place, like not only to automate, which of course will always be there, that pressure will be there, but to then also gather data and analyze and improve it for the workforce, right? Whether it's safety, whether it's, you know, always looking at that improved output, that's always going to be there. Let's just call a spade a spade. It's going to be there no matter what. But how that intertwines with just leveling up individuals, helping them out as they're like growing into their roles. Like that's the part that I'm really excited to just kind of see how, in buzzwords wise, right? Like see the convergence of like, you know, AI dropped into it. And like I joke about that because everyone says it as you go into it, but like it is super interesting because as this information is able to be gathered 3, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, it would have sat on a shelf, it would have taken forever to work through. And now we're able to like actually get meaningful insights like out of it in a time where we can actually act on them, right? Like it's again, I've referenced said it a few times, 6 months, not 6 years, right? Like that's
Yeah.
huge.
Absolutely. And I love that concept. I'm a big fan, of course, of human centered leadership, right? But being able to take that data that you are helping collect, right? You're not generating the data, you're collecting the data and providing pathways to help production. Yes, because that's why businesses are in existence, but you have to make the lives better of the people behind that production, right? And so using those data insights to do that is pretty cool to me, man. So I appreciate that.
Well, And if you don't mind, I
Go
one
ahead.
quick follow-up comment to that too. I think it's going to be critical, like kind of tying a few of our subjects together that we've touched on, is like that aspect of it will be critical in attracting the next generation of workforce. I think if you're not looking at or doing those things, like it is going to be hard to attract talent
Yeah.
in all transparency.
So how, I mean, and I've written about it, but I hate the buzzwords of Industry 4.0, Industry 5.0, right? But the whole concept coined by people way smarter than me in other countries behind Industry 5.0 is how humans and the technology that was developed in Industry 4 will be able to really truly advance the industry. Do you see that on the software side too, as being like that next hurdle that we need to get through? Is adopting some of these technologies, these software systems, etc.?
Yes, I mean, of course, I will say the same as you. Much smarter people than I have like designed that out, and so like to call it not applicable across the board, just absolutely not true, right? Like it will be kind of the next stage as things evolve into it. A anecdote from like walking around like and seeing these factories and everything else like that, especially in food manufacturing. It's the workforce, of course. Like everyone has their cell phones, they're left in the lockers, but they have their cell phones. They can work through it, and the look of like confusion, right? When like they're going out to like do this job and everything else like that. And there isn't like tool sets that look like things that we would expect to see being in a generation age where we're like, yeah, I have a 3-year-old daughter. I'm still trying to figure out like it's going to be a while, but at some point she's going to have a cell phone, right? And she'll be able to use it like better than me as we do the whole thing. Back to that topic of like attracting that workforce, retaining that workforce, leveling up that workforce. Like it is going to be their ability to execute within those tool sets that will like not only again like it's all driven always will drive like the success of the organization, but that is going to be predicated on those individuals being successful in those roles, which then again should hopefully, if done right, like if you have them successfully executing, deploying, utilizing all these advanced tool sets that we have there, should give opportunities for them to level up, right? Like again, the next tier of welder, right? As you're going up, and now we're looking at the next tier of like supervisory level and execution within the production environment.
Got it. Right on. Last question, my friend Tyler. What haven't I asked you that you want to share, or what haven't we talked about that you want to talk about?
Man, I really I was thinking about this as we were coming up to, and I didn't plan on, but like I feel like I need to refer back to like It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia somehow, but like
Yes.
no, I think the only thing that we haven't like touched on, and maybe in an adjacent standpoint, I kind of like dove through it, is like this change and like these updates and everything else that's going to come out, they will happen, right? Like it is like there's just the world changes, new things are evolved and everything else like that. At the core of what I think we're talking about here is like the alignment of the people and leveling your people up as you go through that just determines how long it's going to take for us to get there. I like even in my careers, I've seen like things evolve and go through this. Like it is kind of a pretty simplistic statement, but a pretty on point adage, I would say, where like it will continue to move faster, and we need the individuals who can help facilitate that. Otherwise, we will fall behind. And that generic statement's applicable not just to manufacturing, but even like my team, my organization. What we're doing here is that we have to like level up the people to level up the organization.
Yeah, I love that. And on that mic drop moment, man, I'm going to say thank you, Tyler. This was an awesome conversation. Your experience, you're the first food manufacturer that I've had on. I've had other people who fish, but not like professionally. And not professionally as in like Bass Pro Shop professional fishing, like Deadliest Catch professional fishing. So this was really cool. This is what I love about this part of what I do is I get to hear really cool stories and hear people's journeys and get experience to things that here in the middle of the desert I would never have even thought about. And you provided that kind of insight and experiential story to the audience today that may not know the Alaskan seafood industry and the ins and outs of it. So Tyler, how can people get a hold of you if they want to hear more about your story, want to talk more about software? where, or just want a recommendation on where to get some really good seafood?
The really good seafood I have in spades. That is something we're known for here in Seattle. And so anyone who's listening to visit Seattle, I'd be happy to throw out some of my favorites. My email is obviously probably the easiest way, which is just my name, tyler.marshall@advantive.com. And be happy to follow up with anyone. Like, actually gave out some restaurant recommendations just yesterday to someone I was talking
Awesome.
to. If you're a fan of oysters, I got a spot for you. So.
Okay. All right. I will hit you up. I do need to make it up to the Pacific Northwest to Seattle. The last time I was in Washington, I was on the other side of the state, and it's a much different experience inland than it is on the coast there. So I'll make it happen. We'll come have a beer and some oysters and just kind of hang out. But thank you again for joining me today. This was a great call.
Thank you for having me. Very much appreciated.
I'm telling you guys, that was a ride. Today's conversation with Tyler Marshall gave us everything I love on this show. Unexpected stories and an inside look at what it actually takes to lead in the manufacturing world. From stories about flying into remote Alaskan fish plants to bouncing off the ceiling of a bush plane with a high school basketball team to building software solutions that drive real human impact on the shop floor, Tyler brought the stories today. We talked about trust, about alignment, and why culture is the engine that keeps your team moving in the same direction. We heard how leadership should look in the age of automation and why the future of manufacturing depends on leveling up people. So Tyler, again, seriously, thank you. Thanks for the stories, the honesty, and for reminding us that even in the world of MES systems and AI, it's still the people that matter the most. And you, yes, you listening right now, thank you for being part of this community. Whether you're out on the floor, behind a desk, or somewhere in between, I hope you're walking away from this episode with something to think about and something to act on. Now, if you've enjoyed this episode, do me a favor. Share with a friend, a colleague, teammate, your boss, your grandma. Then rate and review the show, because every time you do that, it rockets us up the algorithm and it helps us grow. Also, please follow us on social media. LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and check out everything else that we're doing over at themfgconnector.com. More podcasts, resources, merch, and ways to stay plugged into the culture of this incredible industry. And if this conversation resonated with you, check out our past episodes. You'll love the energy and the insight. Okay, that's it for today. Thanks again, Tyler. Thank you for tuning in. And as always, keep building, keep leading, and don't forget, culture is a team sport. I'm Jim Mayer, and I'll see you the next time on the Manufacturing Culture Podcast.